The coffin was ready. The mourners had gathered. But when it was opened, the bridegroom was nowhere inside. Welcome to Mystery Files. I am your host, Raven. Comment below and tell me where you're listening from tonight. I always love hearing from everyone in our mystery community. Your support makes every investigation more memorable. Now, let's uncover the truth. The rain had begun shortly after midnight, sweeping across Baker Street in silver lines and rattling upon the windows with a persistence that rendered sleep impossible. I had therefore abandoned my bed and taken refuge beside the dying fire, where I found Sherlock Holmes still fully dressed, his long figure folded into the armchair and his eyes fixed upon a small object balanced on the tip of one lean finger. It was a grain of rice. "You perceive nothing remarkable in it, Watson?" he asked. "I perceive that it has escaped somebody's supper, an explanation distinguished chiefly by its comfort." He held the grain nearer the lamp. "It is stained with beeswax, dusted with powdered cedar, and pierced through the center by a needle. Therefore it has not escaped a supper. It has escaped a wedding charm." "A wedding charm?" "From the East End, most probably. Among certain seafaring families, rice is threaded into little strings and placed beneath a bridegroom's collar to protect him from drowning. The superstition is Malay in origin, though improved, as all superstitions are, by London." I smiled. "And where did you find it?" "On the stair, adhering to the cuff of the gentleman who has been waiting below for the last 11 minutes. I glanced towards the door. "How could you possibly know that?" "The tread is heavy but regular, indicating a man accustomed to discipline." He declined Mrs. Hudson's offer to come up, which implies either fear or secrecy. Every 2 minutes he crosses the hall, pauses beneath our door, and returns to the window. A soldier would remain still. A policeman would knock. A servant waits because he has been ordered to wait. At that moment, there came 3 sharp taps. Holmes's thin lips curved. "A servant," said he, "who has at last decided that obedience is less important than terror." The man who entered was broad-shouldered and grey-haired, wearing a black coat whose wet sleeves shone beneath the gaslight. His face possessed that solemn immobility cultivated by the better class of domestic, yet his breathing was hurried, and one gloved hand trembled against the brim of his hat. "Mr. Sherlock Holmes." Holmes indicated the chair opposite us. "You are Silas Crewe, butler to Sir Claudius Merivale. You travelled here from Blackheath in a private carriage, though you dismissed it 2 streets away. You have recently handled a cedar chest and attended a wedding conducted according to certain maritime customs. The bridegroom is missing, and you fear that he is dead." The man stared at him. "God preserve us," he whispered. "Then you know already." "I know nothing of consequence. Sit down and supply it." Crewe remained standing. "Sir Claudius commanded that no word leave Merivale House, but what I have seen tonight, Mr. Holmes, I cannot keep silent." "Then do not." The butler drew off his gloves with stiff fingers. A dark smear marked his right palm. "The wedding took place yesterday afternoon. Miss Eleanor Merivale, Sir Claudius's only daughter, was married to Mr. Julian Vale. Profession: a gentleman of independent means. He had travelled abroad and owned interests in shipping. Sir Claudius did not approve at first, but Miss Eleanor would have him. And the maritime charm." Crewe looked bewildered until Holmes displayed the grain of rice. "Mrs. Leon put it beneath Mr. Vale's collar," he said. "She was nurse to Miss Eleanor when the family lived in Singapore. It was an old custom of hers." Mr. Vale laughed and allowed it. "Continue." "The ceremony was held in the private chapel upon the estate. There were only 12 present: Sir Claudius, Miss Eleanor, Mr. Vale, the Reverend Abel Forsyth, Captain Rudge, an old friend of Sir Claudius, Mr. Adrian Merivale, Sir Claudius's nephew, Mrs. Leon, myself, and 4 servants. Afterward, the party dined in the west drawing room." "And the bridegroom?" "He seemed cheerful. At 10:30 he went to the library with Sir Claudius. Voices were heard, angry voices. At 11, Mr. Vale left the house alone. In weather such as this? The rain had not yet begun. He said he required air. Miss Eleanor wished to accompany him, but he refused. He promised to return in 20 minutes. Crewe's voice failed. Holmes leaned forward, his expression suddenly intent. He did not return. No, sir. At midnight we searched the grounds. Near the yew-walk we found his right glove. At the edge of the old burial ground, there were footprints leading to the family vault. Leading both ways? Only towards it. Holmes's eyes flickered. Had the earth been disturbed? No earth, sir. The Merivales are placed in stone coffins within the vault. The iron door stood open, though Sir Claudius keeps the key in his desk. Inside, the butler stopped and looked towards the rain-blackened window, as if something might be listening beyond it. Inside was the coffin prepared for Lady Beatrice Merivale. I could not suppress an exclamation. Lady Beatrice, as Crewe presently explained, had been Sir Claudius's elder sister. She lay gravely ill in the house, and, owing to an ancient family custom, her stone coffin had already been installed in the vault. "The lid had been moved," said Crewe. "There were scratches upon the floor, as though two men had dragged it aside. We lifted it completely." "And discovered the bridegroom's body?" I asked. Crewe turned his colorless face upon me. "No, doctor. We discovered nothing. The coffin was empty." Holmes rose and walked to the mantelpiece. "You expected Lady Beatrice to be inside?" "No, sir. She is alive, though the physician says she cannot survive the week." "Then why does an empty coffin alarm you?" "Because," said Crewe, lowering his voice, "Mr. Vale's coat lay folded at the bottom of it. His watch rested upon the coat, still ticking. Beside it was the key to Sir Claudius's desk. The rain beat harder against the panes. Somewhere in the street a cab rolled past, its wheels hissing upon the flooded stones. "You mentioned scratches," Holmes said. "Fresh?" "Yes." "Footprints within the vault?" "Several. But the floor is dusty and confused. Captain Rudge, Mr. Adrian, Sir Claudius, and I all entered before we understood that we were destroying evidence." "Very considerate of you." Crewe flushed. "There is worse, Mr. Holmes." "There generally is." The butler reached inside his coat and produced an envelope sealed with black wax. Across its face, in a vigorous hand, were written the words, "For Eleanor, when the coffin is opened." "This lay beneath the watch," he said. Sir Claudius seized it and forbade anyone to touch it. Later, while the others searched the grounds, I returned and took it. "You stole it." "I did. Miss Eleanor's name was upon it, and I feared Sir Claudius meant to destroy it. But when I reached the hall, I found him standing behind me. He demanded the letter. I refused. Then he said something which brought me here despite 38 years in his service." "What did he say?" Crewe's trembling hand closed around the envelope. "He said, 'If Holmes sees that letter, the wrong man will hang.'" For several seconds Holmes did not move. Then he crossed the room and examined the wax without touching it. The seal bore the impression of a ship beneath 3 stars. "Has it been opened?" "No, sir." "By whom was the coffin ordered?" "Sir Claudius arranged it 6 months ago." "And who selected the stonemason?" "Mr. Julian Vale." At this, Holmes's entire manner altered. The indolence vanished from his eyes, and his narrow face became keen with that cold intellectual fire which I had learned to regard as the sure herald of danger. He took down his Inverness cape. "Your coat, Watson." "At this hour?" "My dear fellow, a bridegroom has vanished into a tomb, leaving behind his clothes, his watch, and a warning written before his disappearance. His footprints enter the burial ground, but do not leave it. An empty coffin awaits a woman who is not yet dead, and the missing man himself arranged its construction." He turned to Crewe. "You will give me the letter." The butler hesitated, then surrendered it. Holmes slipped it unopened into his pocket. "Why not read it now?" I asked. "Because its contents may lie, Watson. Its seal cannot." He extinguished the lamp, and the room fell into shadow save for the red glow of the fire. "Come," If we reach Merivale House before dawn, we may yet learn why a living bridegroom prepared an empty coffin, and why someone has gone to such extraordinary trouble to persuade us that he entered it. Our journey through the sleeping city was one of the most dismal I can recall. The rain had settled into a steady downpour, and the lamps along the Kent Road appeared as blurred yellow stains upon an immense curtain of darkness. Crewe sat opposite us in rigid silence. Holmes, beside me, leaned forward with his chin upon his breast, his fingers closed around the unopened letter in his pocket. It was nearly 4 when the cab turned between 2 stone pillars and entered the grounds of Merivale House. The mansion stood upon a low rise, its many gables cutting into the paling sky. One window burned above the eastern wing, while the remainder of the building lay black and solemn among the dripping elms. "That is Lady Beatrice's chamber," said Crewe, following my gaze. "Dr. Harcourt has not left her." "And the family vault?" Holmes asked. "Beyond the yew walk, behind the chapel." We had scarcely entered the hall before a tall, powerfully built man emerged from the shadows. He was perhaps 60, with silver hair swept back from a broad forehead, and features which might once have been handsome but had hardened under long habits of command. He wore a dark dressing gown, yet his posture was as formal as if he stood before a regiment. "Crewe," said he, "you have disobeyed me." The butler bowed his head. "I accept the consequences, Sir Claudius." The baronet turned his stern eyes upon us. "And you have brought strangers into my house." "Sherlock Holmes is seldom a stranger where facts are being concealed," said Holmes. A flush rose beneath Sir Claudius's pale skin. "This is a private calamity." "Then you should have kept it private from the man who arranged the coffin." For an instant, the baronet's control deserted him. His glance dropped involuntarily towards Holmes's coat pocket. "You have the letter." "I have an envelope," Holmes replied. "Whether it contains a letter remains to be established." "You will return it." Eventually, Sir Claudius advanced a step, but Holmes's indifferent expression checked him more effectively than a raised weapon. "The police have been summoned," the baronet said. "By whom?" "By my nephew Adrian. Inspector Lestrade is expected shortly. Then we have little time before every footprint acquires an official boot mark. Watson, the vault." Sir Claudius planted himself before the door. "No one enters my family burial place without my permission." From the staircase came the rustle of a dress. A young woman stood upon the landing, one hand gripping the carved rail. Her bridal beauty had been made almost spectral by grief. Her dark hair hung loosely over a white wrapper, and her eyes were fixed upon Holmes with desperate intensity. "I give you permission," she said. "Eleanor," cried Sir Claudius, "if Mr. Holmes can find Julian, he may go wherever he pleases." Her father's face tightened. "Your husband has brought dishonor upon this house. My husband may be dead. Those possibilities are not mutually exclusive," said Holmes. I thought the remark unnecessarily harsh, but Eleanor Vale descended without flinching. "You believe he planned his disappearance?" "I believe only that he planned something." "Why did he quarrel with your father?" She looked from Holmes to Sir Claudius. "Julian would not tell me. After dinner, father asked him into the library. When Julian returned, he was pale and angry. He kissed my forehead and said he needed to settle a matter before we could begin our life together. His exact words? He said, 'There is one ghost too many at Merivale.'" The baronet gave a contemptuous laugh. "Dramatic nonsense." Holmes studied him. "Ghosts, Sir Claudius, are generally the names which guilty men give to inconvenient memories." Without awaiting an answer, he followed Crewe into the rain. The chapel stood some 200 yards from the house. Behind it, a narrow avenue of ancient yews descended towards a walled burial ground. Crewe raised his lantern, revealing the bridegroom's glove, where it remained beneath a bush, protected by a wooden box, hastily placed over it. Holmes crouched beside the object. "A left glove," said I. Crewe described it as the right. The butler stared. "I beg your pardon, sir. In the darkness I must have been mistaken." "No, you held it before carrying the lantern to the vault." A man may mistake a face at midnight, but seldom a glove in his own hand. Crewe's expression became troubled. Then it has been changed. Holmes examined the damp leather. This glove has lain here less than an hour. The rain began shortly after midnight, yet its inner lining is dry. Someone replaced it after I left for Baker Street. Precisely. Beyond the glove, deep impressions crossed the soft ground towards the burial wall. Holmes measured one with his pocket rule. These are said to be Mr. Vale's. Crewe nodded. His boots had a distinctive square heel. They are square, certainly. Yet observe the depth. The toe is more deeply marked than the heel, although the path descends. A walking man would place his weight oppositely. What does that signify? I asked. That the prints were made by a person walking backwards from the vault, towards the house. They appear to lead in only because we are viewing them from the wrong end. He passed through the iron gate. The vault door stood open, its lock scratched but unbroken. Within, niches lined the stone walls. At the center rested the massive grey coffin, its lid displaced upon wooden rollers. Julian Vale's evening coat was folded inside, with a silver watch placed upon it. Holmes lifted the watch, listened, and opened the case. The hands indicated 23 minutes past 11. You said it was ticking when found, he remarked. Yes, it is not ticking now. It may have stopped since. It has not stopped. It has been stopped. Holmes showed me a minute curl of crimson thread, caught beneath the winding crown. A thread was tied here and drawn through the coffin's drainage hole. Someone outside the vault arrested the mechanism at a chosen moment. He then examined the coat. From its collar he plucked 3 grains of pierced rice, but from the shoulders he brushed a pale grey powder into an envelope. Cedar dust? I suggested. Limestone. The coffin. Holmes shook his head. This stone is granite. He directed the lantern towards the rear wall. Near the floor, almost hidden beneath the coffin, a thin white line marked the black flags. Holmes pressed his fingers against it and brought them to his nose. Fresh mortar, said he. Crewe drew back. There has been no masonry here for 6 months. Then your household has been inattentive. With his cane, Holmes tapped the wall. The first blows returned a solid note. At the third came a faint hollowness. Before he could strike again, a cry rang through the burial ground. Eleanor stood at the gate, her white dress soaked by rain. In her hand she held a sheet of paper. This was beneath my pillow, she gasped. It was not there when I went downstairs. Holmes took it. Across the page ran a single sentence in black ink. Your bridegroom is alive, but the coffin must be filled before sunrise. From the direction of the house came the sudden tolling of a bell. Crewe's face went ashen. That is Lady Beatrice's room. A second toll sounded, followed by a third. The signal for death, he whispered. Holmes glanced from the fresh mortar to the empty granite coffin. Then, said he grimly, someone has arranged the timing with remarkable care. Eleanor swayed as though the tolling had struck her bodily. I caught her arm, but she recovered herself and turned towards the house. My aunt. Go with her, Watson, said Holmes. Crewe will remain here. There was in his tone that which admitted no argument. Eleanor and I hurried up the yew-walk while the bell continued its measured lament. At the mansion door, we encountered a thin, dark-bearded man carrying a medical case. His grave expression told me the truth before he spoke. Dr. Harcourt, Eleanor whispered. I am sorry, Mrs. Vale. Lady Beatrice died at 4:17. Was she conscious? For one brief interval, she attempted to speak, but her strength failed. Attempted? I asked. Did you distinguish any words? The physician glanced at me with irritation. Something concerning a ship, perhaps. She said, The stars are wrong. Then she died. The phrase brought instantly to my mind the seal upon Holmes's envelope. A ship beneath 3 stars. A clatter of wheels sounded outside. The front door opened to admit Lestrade, accompanied by 2 constables and a fair-haired young man in evening clothes. The latter's handsome face was drawn with fatigue, though his light eyes were alert. "Adrian Merivale," Eleanor said coldly. Her cousin removed his wet gloves. "I fetched the police because Uncle Claudius would not. Julian's disappearance cannot be hidden merely to protect the family name." Lestrade recognized me and gave a short nod. "Where is Mr. Holmes?" "In the vault." "Of course he is," said the inspector gloomily. We returned together. Holmes had moved the coffin sufficiently to expose a square patch of newer masonry in the rear wall. Crewe stood beside him, holding the lantern, while Sir Claudius watched from the doorway with undisguised fury. "You have no authority to damage this vault," he said. "I have damaged nothing," replied Holmes. "The person who concealed a door beneath plaster may complain when we find him." "A door?" Lestrade pushed forward. Holmes scraped away a fragment of mortar with his knife. Beneath it appeared a narrow iron plate. "A service entrance," said Sir Claudius after a pause. "It was sealed before my father's time." "Not very securely," Holmes observed. "The mortar is scarcely 12 hours old." Lestrade ordered a constable to fetch tools. Within minutes, the covering had been removed, revealing an iron panel fitted without handle or keyhole. Holmes pressed its lower edge, and it swung inward upon oiled hinges. A passage descended into darkness. The air issuing from it was cold, and carried the mingled smells of wet earth, lamp oil, and something sharply medicinal. Holmes took the lantern. "Watson." Lestrade caught his sleeve. "This is police business. Then try to keep up." We descended in single file. The passage was so narrow that our shoulders brushed the walls. After perhaps 30 yards, it ended in a low chamber beneath the chapel. A camp bed stood against one side. Upon a crate were a lantern, a water flask, bread, bandages, and a small brown bottle. I uncorked it cautiously. "Chloroform." Lestrade pointed to the bed. "Then Vale was held here." Holmes examined the blanket. A man lay upon it, but not unwillingly. There are no bindings, no signs of struggle, and the bread has been cut with the knife beside it. "Perhaps his captor trusted the drug," suggested Adrian. "Perhaps," said Holmes. "Yet a prisoner rendered insensible by chloroform seldom trims a lamp." Upon the floor lay a pair of boots with square heels. Mud clung thickly to their soles. "The footprints," Lestrade cried. "Vale made them himself." "No," said Holmes. "These boots are a size too small for the missing man, according to the impression left inside his glove. Moreover, the mud upon them is red clay. The burial path is black loam." At the far end of the chamber, a short flight of steps rose to another door. It opened into a disused vestry behind the chapel altar. Upon a table lay strips of black sealing wax and a brass stamp bearing the device of a ship beneath 3 stars. Eleanor gave a startled cry. "That seal belonged to my grandfather. It disappeared years ago." Holmes removed the unopened envelope from his pocket and compared the impressions. "Similar," said Lestrade. "Too similar. The old seal has a chip upon the upper star. The impression on Crewe's envelope lacks it. This letter was sealed with a copy." "Then it is false?" Eleanor asked. "The seal is false. That does not determine the paper within." Adrian stepped closer. "Surely we must open it now." Holmes looked at him. "You are remarkably eager, Mr. Merivale. My cousin's husband is missing, and Lady Beatrice's death has made you heir to a considerable fortune, unless her final will states otherwise." Adrian's face hardened. "I know nothing of her will." From the chapel came the sudden crash of breaking glass. A constable shouted. Holmes extinguished our lantern, but footsteps were already racing across the flagstones above. We burst from the vestry in time to see a cloaked figure leap through a shattered side window. Lestrade and his men rushed after it. Holmes did not follow. He bent beside the altar, where a burning taper had been flung among a heap of old papers. I stamped out the flames while he snatched one half-charred sheet from their midst. It was a plan of Merivale House. A red line connected Lady Beatrice's chamber to the family vault, passing through rooms and corridors unknown to us. Beside the vault, someone had written a single word: exchange. Before I could ask its meaning, a gunshot sounded from the burial ground. We ran outside and found Lestrade kneeling beside one of his constables. The man had been struck across the temple but was alive. Of the cloaked fugitive there was no sign. Upon the open coffin, however, lay an object which had not been there minutes before. It was Julian Vale's missing right glove. Holmes lifted it by the cuff. Inside, written in fresh blood, were 4 words: "Do not bury Beatrice." The blood was still wet. Holmes touched it with the corner of his handkerchief, rubbed the stain between finger and thumb, and then held it beneath his nose. "Human?" Lestrade asked. "Blood is less communicative than people imagine. It tells us that an injury occurred, but not whose purpose it served." Eleanor stared at the glove. "Julian wrote those words. Is that his hand?" "No, but he might have been weak or forced." Holmes turned the glove inside out. A narrow cut crossed its lining near the thumb, though the leather itself was unbroken. "This blood was introduced from within," he said. The glove was filled at the thumb and squeezed until the liquid emerged onto the writing finger. A theatrical effect, not the message of a wounded man. Sir Claudius gave a harsh exhalation. Vale planned this grotesque business. The tunnels, the false footprints, the letter. Everything points to him. Everything points with such determination, Holmes replied, that I begin to pity Mr. Vale. Lestrade had dispatched his men around the burial wall. The rain had weakened to a fine grey mist, and dawn was spreading over the grounds. Holmes crossed to the place where the cloaked figure had vanished. A low brick boundary separated the cemetery from an orchard. On its upper surface he discovered a dark strand caught upon the broken edge. "Black wool," I said. "Dyed horsehair." The cloak was a costume. Beyond the wall, the wet grass showed no footprints. Instead, 2 parallel grooves extended between the trees. "A bicycle," said Lestrade. "A small-wheeled machine carrying unusual weight," Holmes corrected. "Observe how deeply both tires have sunk." The tracks ended beside a locked potting shed. When crew produced the key, we found an old bicycle inside. A black theatrical cloak had been thrown across its handlebars, and upon the floor lay a revolver, from which one chamber had been fired. Lestrade picked it up. "A neat little collection." "Neatness again," murmured Holmes. Adrian stood in the doorway. "That bicycle belongs to me." Sir Claudius turned upon him. "You brought the police, and now your weapon is found beside a disguise." "It is not my revolver. Your initials are engraved upon it," said Lestrade. Indeed, the silver plate bore the letters A.M. Adrian's face lost its color. "It was stolen from my room 2 days ago." "Did you report that?" "No. I thought I had misplaced it." Lestrade's expression showed what value he placed upon this explanation. Holmes, however, ignored the weapon and knelt beside the bicycle. From the rear axle he removed a short length of coarse brown fiber. "Hemp rope," he observed. "To carry what?" I asked. "Something heavy enough to deepen both tracks, yet compact enough to be secured behind the rider." His eyes traveled to the orchard gate, beyond which a service road curved towards the stable yard. "Crew, who has access to this shed?" "Every senior servant. Mr. Adrian also uses it. And Mrs. Leanne. She gathers herbs in the orchard and sometimes stores them here." At the mention of the nurse, Eleanor raised her head. "Where is she? I have not seen her since before midnight." Crew looked alarmed. "She was to sit with Lady Beatrice after 3. "But she did not," said Dr. Harcourt, who had joined us. "I assumed Lady Beatrice dismissed her." Holmes sprang erect. "Her room. At once." Mrs. Leanne occupied a small chamber near Eleanor's apartments. The bed had not been slept in. Upon the dressing table stood several carved boxes, a porcelain image of a sea dragon, and a framed photograph of a younger Mrs. Leanne beside a dark-haired boy in sailor's clothes. "Her son?" I asked. "She told me he drowned 20 years ago," said Eleanor. Holmes examined the photograph, then opened the cedar chest beneath it. Inside were coils of threaded rice, identical to those used in the wedding charm. One string had recently been cut. At the bottom, he found a bundle of letters tied with faded blue ribbon. All were addressed to Mrs. Leanne, but each bore the device of a ship beneath 3 stars. Sir Claudius seized the uppermost envelope. "Those belong to my father." Holmes took it from him and compared its seal with that upon the unopened message. "The same unchipped impression," he said. "Our supposed copy is older than the damaged seal in the chapel." Sir Claudius's composure broke. "That is impossible. Only if your account of the seal is true." A cry came from the corridor. One of Lestrade's constables appeared, breathing hard. "We found Mrs. Leanne, sir. She's in the old laundry." "Alive?" Eleanor demanded. "Yes, madam, but locked inside. She says Mr. Adrian attacked her." All eyes turned towards the young man. "That is a lie," Adrian shouted. Holmes was watching not Adrian but Sir Claudius. The baronet's right hand had moved unconsciously to his waistcoat pocket. "Before accusations multiply," said Holmes, "I suggest we discover what Sir Claudius is attempting to conceal." With astonishing speed he caught the baronet's wrist. A small folded document slipped from Sir Claudius's fingers. Eleanor picked it up. Upon the outer page was written, "Last Will and Testament of Lady Beatrice Merivale." Across the bottom, in fresh red ink, someone had drawn a ship beneath 3 stars. Sir Claudius snatched the document from Eleanor before she could unfold it. "This is no concern of yours. My aunt's will is very much my concern if it explains Julian's disappearance," she answered. Lestrade extended his hand. "I'll take charge of that, sir." For several seconds the two men faced one another. Then the baronet surrendered the paper with the air of a sovereign yielding territory. Lestrade opened it upon the dressing table. The will had been executed 6 weeks earlier. Lady Beatrice left the greater part of her fortune to Eleanor, with a smaller annuity to Mrs. Leanne. Adrian received nothing. Yet beneath the signatures appeared a handwritten clause. Should Eleanor's husband die before Lady Beatrice's burial, the entire estate would pass to Sir Claudius. "Convenient," said Adrian. "It is a forgery," Sir Claudius thundered. "I never saw that clause." Holmes examined the ink without touching it. The clause is fresh, as is the red device. The remainder was written weeks ago. Someone wished this paper discovered today. "But it was in his pocket," Adrian protested. "Because I found it in Lady Beatrice's desk after her death," said Sir Claudius. "I concealed it to prevent precisely this spectacle." Holmes turned to Dr. Harcourt. "Could Lady Beatrice have written after midnight?" "Impossible. She had not possessed the strength to hold a pen for 3 days." Lestrade folded the will. "Until we know more, no one leaves the house." Mrs. Leanne was brought from the laundry soon afterward. She was a small, dignified woman, with silver threaded through her black hair. A bruise darkened her temple, yet her voice remained steady. "Mr. Adrian came to my room before midnight," she said. "He asked about letters sent to me by Sir Claudius's father. When I refused, he struck me. I awoke, locked in the laundry." Adrian laughed bitterly. "I was with Eleanor until 11:30, and afterward I rode for the police." "You left the drawing room at 11:20, Eleanor corrected quietly. Julian had just gone outside. "Only for 10 minutes. 10 minutes, Holmes remarked, is ample time for an innocent action and insufficient for several guilty ones." He asked Mrs. Leanne to identify the photograph. "My son, Way," she replied. "You said he drowned." "He did." "Where?" "Aboard the merchant vessel Celestial Crown, 20 years ago." Sir Claudius gripped the back of a chair. Holmes noticed the movement. "And that vessel carried the emblem of a ship beneath 3 stars. Mrs. Leanne's dark eyes rested upon him. "Yes. What was Sir Claudius's connection to it?" "He owned the ship," she said, "with his father and Captain Rudge." The name caused crew to start. Captain Rudge left the house shortly before the wedding supper ended. He has not been seen since. Holmes became utterly still. "Why was the Celestial Crown lost?" he asked. Mrs. Leanne looked towards Sir Claudius. "Officially, a storm. And unofficially." Before she could answer, a constable entered, carrying a dripping parcel wrapped in sailcloth. "Found this in the ornamental lake, sir. It was weighted with stones." Inside lay a man's blood-stained shirt. The initials J.V. were embroidered upon its breast. Eleanor covered her mouth. Lestrade inspected the great brown stain. "This may settle the question of what happened to Vale." "No," said Holmes. He lifted the cloth towards the window. "It enlarges it." Through the stain, scarcely visible against the linen, ran 3 straight cuts. Their edges were clean and bloodless. "The shirt was slashed before blood was poured upon it," I said. Holmes nodded. From the pocket he drew a crumpled railway receipt. "1 trunk," he read. "Deposited last evening at Charing Cross Station under the name James Venn." "Julian Vale," Eleanor whispered. "The same initials." Holmes's eyes shone. "At last we possess something our conspirator did not intend us to find. Watson, we return to London." "And Vale?" Lestrade demanded. "If he is alive, he is connected with that trunk. If he is dead, its contents may tell us why." As Holmes reached the door, Mrs. Leanne spoke behind him. "Mr. Holmes, the celestial crown did not sink in a storm. It was deliberately sent beneath the sea." Holmes looked back at Sir Claudius. "And now," said he, "someone intends to bury the truth a second time." We reached Charing Cross shortly after 7, with Lestrade beside us and 2 plainclothes officers following at a distance. The morning traffic had begun to thicken, and beneath the great iron roof, steam rolled about the platforms like fog upon a battlefield. At the luggage office, Holmes presented the receipt. The clerk consulted his ledger. "A black seaman's trunk, sir. Deposited by a gentleman answering to the name of James Venn. Has anyone attempted to claim it?" "Not yet. Then someone soon will." The trunk was brought into a private room. Its brass plate had been removed, leaving 4 clean screw holes in the wood. Holmes knelt and examined the lock. "It has been opened since it arrived." "By whom?" Lestrade demanded. "By a man who possessed no key, but considerable impatience." The inspector forced the lid. Within lay a coil of rope, a damp naval coat, and a leather-bound ledger whose pages were stained by seawater. Beneath these articles we found a narrow tin box containing insurance papers for the Celestial Crown, together with a signed order directing Captain Rudge to alter the vessel's course on the night she sank. The order bore the name of Sir Claudius Merivale. "So the baronet destroyed his own ship," I said. Holmes turned the document towards the light. "No, Watson. Observe the final letters. The ink thickens because the writer paused. The signature is an imitation." "Rudge forged it?" asked Lestrade. 20 years ago he scuttled the vessel, intending to claim that Sir Claudius had ordered him to do so. But the ship carried more than insured cargo. It carried witnesses. Among them was Mrs. Leanne's son. A muffled thump came from beneath the false bottom of the trunk. Lestrade and I tore away the inner boards. Julian Vale lay cramped within the concealed compartment, his wrists tied, and a gag across his mouth. He was pale and scarcely conscious, but alive. As I bent to examine him, Holmes extinguished the gas. "Quiet," he whispered. The door opened. A heavy figure entered, carrying a dark lantern in one hand and a pistol in the other. Holmes struck the weapon aside with his cane. Lestrade seized the intruder, and after a brief, violent struggle, we dragged him into the light. Captain Rudge was a thick-necked man with a weather-beaten face and a white scar running from his ear to his jaw. His expression, when he saw Julian freed, was not fear but murderous disappointment. "You were expected, Captain," said Holmes. "The trunk contained the evidence you have sought for 20 years. You could not permit it to remain in police hands." Rudge said nothing. Julian revived under my ministrations and looked first at Holmes, then at the prisoner. "My wife, safe," I assured him. He closed his eyes in relief. We returned to Merivale House before noon. Holmes assembled the household in the west drawing room. Lady Beatrice's body remained in her chamber, and the burial had been postponed by Lestrade's order. Eleanor ran to Julian and embraced him. Sir Claudius, however, stood apart, his face marked by the exhaustion of a man whose oldest sins had risen before him. Holmes placed the unopened black wax envelope upon the table. "The affair began 20 years ago," said he. "The Celestial Crown carried a valuable cargo, insured far beyond its worth. Captain Rudge intended to sink her, recover part of the cargo secretly, and place responsibility upon Sir Claudius by means of a forged order. But an officer discovered the scheme and removed the ship's ledger before abandoning the vessel. That officer was Mrs. Leon's son, Way." Mrs. Leon bowed her head. "He did not drown," Holmes continued. "He escaped under another name and later became a merchant seaman. Before his death, he entrusted the ledger to his closest friend, Julian Vale." Eleanor looked at her husband. "You knew." "I came to Merivale to return the truth to your family," Julian replied. "Then I met you." "That complicated his purpose," said Holmes. "He wished to expose Rudge without publicly disgracing his bride's father, for Sir Claudius had indeed engaged in insurance fraud, though he had not ordered the sinking. Lady Beatrice knew part of the story. The phrase, 'the stars are wrong,' referred to Rudge's forged seal. On the true emblem, the upper star was chipped. Rudge's copies were not." Holmes broke the envelope. Within was a letter written by Julian. He had described the hidden passage, the ledger, and his intention to leave his coat and watch in the empty coffin as a signal to Rudge that the lost evidence had been recovered. He planned to remain in the underground chamber until Rudge came searching, while Adrian fetched the police. "But Captain Rudge learned of the plan," Holmes said. "He intercepted Julian, drugged him, and concealed him in the trunk. He then transformed a private trap into an elaborate accusation. He replaced the glove, manufactured the footprints, planted Adrian's revolver, forged the clause in Lady Beatrice's will, and left the blood-stained shirt to suggest murder." "And Mrs. Leanne?" asked Lestrade. "Rudge attacked her because she possessed the old letters and could identify the true seal. He accused Adrian in her hearing while she was dazed, trusting that suggestion would become memory. The bicycle carried Captain Rudge, with Julian bound upon the rear rack. That accounts for the deep tracks and the hemp fiber." Sir Claudius looked towards the coffin plan. "What did exchange mean?" "Julian intended to exchange the false evidence in the chapel for the true ledger. Rudge misunderstood the notation. He believed the ledger had been hidden inside Lady Beatrice's coffin. That is why the warning ordered you not to bury her. He needed the coffin kept accessible until he could search it." "The message in blood?" I asked. "A second attempt to delay the burial. The blood came from a slaughtered fowl in the stable yard. The cuts in Julian's shirt were made before it was stained, and the stopped watch falsely fixed the hour of his supposed death." Adrian stepped forward. "Why frame me?" "You were the ideal suspect," said Holmes. "You had no inheritance, owned the bicycle and revolver, and openly opposed your uncle. Rudge expected Lestrade to arrest you while he recovered the ledger and killed Julian elsewhere." Lestrade shifted uncomfortably. "There was evidence." "There was abundance," Holmes replied. "Evidence becomes suspicious when it behaves like an overeager witness." Rudge suddenly wrenched free of the constable beside him and sprang towards the French windows. Sir Claudius blocked his path. The captain struck him down, but Julian, though still weak, caught Rudge about the knees. Lestrade and his men completed the arrest. As the handcuffs closed, Rudge glared at Sir Claudius. "You profited as much as I." Sir Claudius rose slowly, blood upon his lip. "And I shall answer for it." He later made a complete confession to the insurance fraud, though the proof established that Rudge alone had scuttled the vessel and caused the deaths aboard her. Adrian was cleared, and Lady Beatrice's genuine will secured Eleanor's inheritance. Mrs. Leon used her annuity to establish a home for the families of lost seamen. Julian and Eleanor departed England for a time, though not before visiting Baker Street to thank Holmes. When they had gone, I remarked that the case had depended upon an empty coffin. "On the contrary, Watson," said Holmes, reaching for his violin. It depended upon everyone attempting to fill it, with a corpse, a fortune, a secret, or a suspicion. And what did you place in it? He drew the bow across the strings and produced a single clear note. Nothing, said he. That was why I alone could see what it contained.